And so our question for today is, how do we get rooted back to our values and purpose and realize the resources available in communities? So first, I'd like to just start by checking in for today's session. And I've posed the question, what is your favorite source of inspiration at the moment? So I invite you to click on the mural board, which is number 3, and put in some sticky notes or some symbols, do some drawing, whatever you think is your favorite source of inspiration at the moment. And Sheldon, I'm happy to, or Michaela's happy to scribe for you.
I was actually thinking about that yesterday and today as I'm driving back to my hometown where I grew up. And I think for me, it's geography and landscape these days are the things that are grounding me in all of this work.
I'll pick up the piece. Nature, mostly. I'm very fortunate and lucky that I get to walk on the beach every day with my dog. And this time of the year is beautiful. We get to see lots of bird life, and the last couple of days the ocean's been a bit raging with the storms and stuff. So the effect that has on the beach is quite amazing too. So yeah, thanks. Peace back.
I'm still trying to figure out how to write a note.
The technology. I'll take the piece. I'll take the piece up while you're still figuring it out, Kate.
Thank you. Yes.
I'm laughing because really I was thinking the thing that's inspired me today is the fact that we've had this housefly in our house for 4 days, and my cat caught it with his paws this morning and ate it.
Oh,
and I'm highly inspired by it because it's so smart. He needs to have more credit than I'm giving him. That's me. Peace back.
Yeah, I think for me, it's just the people, making connection again with the people who I saw quite a lot of before COVID. And Edward and I have been on our own for 14 weeks. And it's been very tricky for both of us. Watching him do his art and doing a bit of my own and getting back to my writing. That's the thing that's driving us at the moment, driving me. I've completely stuffed up the mural, I think. But
it's looking pretty good, Kate. So don't worry about that. You're doing a great job.
I'll pick up the piece. I'm finding university inspiring because it's an amazing bunch of people who are very insightful, critical thinkers, and it's topical for me at the moment. So yeah, university is inspiring. Peace back.
Thanks, Kate. I'll pick up. Being in nature certainly makes me feel connected and grounded, but I also have found that these Wicked Wednesday conversations have been inspiring to me, having these great conversations with my colleagues and peers. So I'm grateful for that. Okay, so we're going to go to number 4 now. And I'd like to welcome Sheldon and thank you for joining us on the road. So Sheldon's going to talk to us about how do we get rooted back to our values and purpose and realise the resources available in communities. So over to you, Sheldon.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to be pulling off the road here. Just give me 2 shakes so I have somewhere to sit and talk from, because I am actually at somewhat close to my destination. So actually, Michaela and I talked a little bit about this last week, and I think it's actually something that is really been inspiring me really almost for the last year, I would say, or 2 years. now that I've taken a job as the executive director here at the Art Community Advocates in Kalamazoo. But there has been this ongoing conversation around person-centered planning with a group of people that I've been trying to pull together to think about and talk about what does that really look like. And there's a bit of a desire or a resurgence to do person-centered planning in a more, what's the word? More traditional way, I think. Really in Michigan, and I think in the US and a number of states, it's actually been somewhat, actually not somewhat, it has been bastardized actually. The individualized plan of service here for people who experience disability is called a person-centered plan. But as we know, as soon as systems get a hold of things like that, they start to make them fit into boxes that I don't think person-centered planning was ever meant to fit into. Fortunately, there is this group that has been trained in traditional person-centered planning processes in the 80s who are, we're all trying to look at how do we acknowledge the resurgence of this and recognize that it can't belong to the system if it's actually going to be re-implemented well. So for me personally at the ARC, we are working with a couple of people to start to examine ways in which and to create some allies who are willing to actually help us relearn how to do that process. So I have one of our self-advocates is a really incredible legislative advocate for people with disabilities across the state, and yet doesn't really have much of a personal support network or a circle around her. And so the beginnings of us thinking about that is for her to reach out to her community, and we've built a small circle and are trying to grow that circle around her of people who are willing to support her. And I think that's true around the state as people continue to examine what it looks like. I think the important piece here in this particular question is how do we recognize or get back to the idea that people need to be connected to their communities, and that that service land is never ever going to create a good person-centered plan without the involvement of other community members, whoever they might be, that people are choosing to invite in and to help them live meaningful lives of contribution in that community. So for my one friend, that means trying to identify some people in our own community who she's connected to or who she might be able to be connected to. And unfortunately, at this point, that turns out to be myself and another advocate at Community Advocates right now, along with an uncle and a brother, although we're continuing to try and think about how to grow that. So the community connection is a piece I feel has really did get lost in the systematization of what we now refer to as a person-centered plan, and which many of us traditionalists look at with askance and hope that that something better could come from it. And that's kind of all I got.
Great, thanks, Sheldon. Okay, let's
Sheldon,
do a great job of harvesting that.
Thanks. Sheldon, I loved what you said about two things particularly spoke to me is around building the circle of support first and focusing on that and connecting to community. Because I totally agree. I think that when systems grab hold of planning and call it person-centered planning, it doesn't happen. It just, it gets lost and forgotten about. And these people that sit in offices that know the person for 5 minutes and traumatize people in having to retell their stories over and over again because the person's different every single time. That we just don't do that. I mean, we don't make time for it. We don't get funded for it, and it gets lost. That's certainly what's happening here.
Well, and I feel like I want to be careful not to paint all of it with really broad brushstrokes, because I do feel like the person I'm thinking about in particular has some real connections to people in the system because of who she is. Yet you're right, the plan of service that she has and the ways in which the supports coordination services think about what does a good plan look like are so limited. And it feels like a stretch for many people to step into a role that, you know, in many ways crosses the boundaries. I think we're asking people to cross the boundary between that they've created between the system and the person in trying to keep them separate. And yet this particular person has a number of people who are in pretty high, you know, administrative roles within the sector in Michigan, and who really love and appreciate what this person brings to the conversation all the time. And when we invited them all in, a number of them were more than happy to jump at the opportunity to think about how can we step in a way that's meaningful and helpful, recognizing that the system didn't do a very good job. And so I want to be really careful, because I think that we also need to figure out how to help people to step across the bridge between systems and real community supports for people. Because even in my role, many people might consider me part of the system, even though I work for an advocacy organization. But my intention and my relationship with this person have become a friendship over the last couple of years, right? She was having trouble going to get a cab, because we live in a relatively small city, to take her to go and do her laundry at a big laundromat, because she prefers to do it all at once. And so she called me on a Saturday and said, I'm really having trouble getting a cab. And I went, well, okay, like, let me know if you don't hear from them in 20 minutes. And if you don't, I will come over and drive you there. And so giving people the opportunity also to step in as a community member is also, I think, valuable and important for us to be thinking about as we're thinking about how do we bring people in and start to adjust our ways of thinking about what the system can and can't offer. And, you know, for me, there's never really been a boundary. I've always stepped beyond those boundaries in any role that I've had, even in the roles in the system, right? And so, and that part of that is modeling that, but it's also speaking into the truth of that and helping people recognize that they may have 20, 30, or 40 people on their caseload, but I can promise you that there's at least whatever, 3, 4, half a dozen people who they feel more connected to, who they have a deeper relationship with. And without actually honoring that those people too are part of the community, we're losing the opportunity to create connections between them. Many of the people that I've supported over the years have become friends of mine, but they've also become friends of my friends because I've invited them in. And so this idea of how do we create community around people or tap into the resources, we also have to start where we are and remember to give people permission to be a part of the conversation, the bigger conversation, rather than just what supports and services are available, but more to the question of what is there that you see as a contribution the person makes, and how do you help them bring that gift into the community as well, so that the community can see it, honor it, and connect with them in the process. Sorry, that was a lot.
Just trying to capture it all on the sticky notes there, Sheldon.
Thanks,
but
Michaela.
I loved what you said, starting where we are and inviting people in, no matter where they sit in the whole gamut of things, be it system, community, family. Doesn't really matter. People are people, right? And if we invite them in, then we can all serve each other. I like that. Curious to hear what spoke to other people in that conversation.
I would like, something spoke to me, which I'd like to share, which is Sheldon mentioning that people on your caseload you may connect with more than other people, because whilst it's not necessarily I work with Mick at YADA and Meredith, and so whilst I understand that in YADA there's no real boundary around how much you can or can't help the people that you work with. There is a perceived limitation by people that you do work with because they are part of an institutionalized system, being the NDIS, and they have this real demarcation between community and family and people or services that are working with them. And so that's an interesting comment that Sheldon makes about not having those boundaries, because whilst I might not have the boundary, it is a boundary for the people I work with, because it's assumed that every organisation has those boundaries. So yeah, it really speaks to me, because I can think of, you're completely right, Sheldon, that I can think of 3 or 4 people that I would honestly call friends, and that I enjoy speaking to. I speak to regularly. We have, they know things about me and I know things about them. And I'd really, if they called me for help, or if I needed help, I might even consider asking them for help as well. So that is community. But there's definitely, and a spoken, they've said to me, for example, I spoke to someone on Saturday and she said to me, "Oh, it's Saturday, I shouldn't be bothering you." And I was more than happy to speak to her on any day. And it came from more than just being a service provider, but actually feeling like she and I had a bit of community together. Peace back.
Kate, I agree. It's been really difficult for us to, ignoring all the COVID things, to break away from the fact, the mental approach of Edward's support workers becoming any more than a paid worker. The providers we use inculcate this idea of professionalism, which means you cannot socialise with the people who you support. 2 I particularly thought were really good and hit it off with Edward really well, and he likes them. I invited them for dinner and they put in a pay sheet, a timesheet, to cover the time they were here for dinner. They weren't working, it was like one evening just all together. And they were also troubled by the fact that there were 2 of them there for dinner. We were just eating dinner and sitting around the table and doing things. They weren't required to do any sort of support or anything. But they said that they really ought to only be one of them, because there was a focus under the NDIS on individual support, so that everyone goes out with one support worker, and that's it. You go out, you go to coffee, you do whatever it is you're doing. There's nothing beyond that. And I'm stuck about how to make it better than it is, how to regroup and push it forward. Yeah, I agree with Sheldon when he was saying earlier about person-centered practice being sort of bastardized by the system. It really has for us. Yeah.
It's also kind of heartbreaking.
It is. It's really hard.
Yes.
I agree with you, Kate, because as parent carers, we are on that other side as well. So that's also been my experiences too in the past, where it's very much, here's your service, that's it. 5 o'clock, we're done. 4:30 in the afternoon, service off. Even if you do have a great connection with them and you can see they want to be able to give a bit more, and they probably do in their work with you, but it's still very much within Monday to Friday, 8:30 to 4:30, Yeah, and
clocking off and on their phones the minute that the shift finishes. It's really, disturbing, really.
Yeah. And for our loved ones, when that's very common about support workers doing that. My son's had that happen a number of times. When they think someone is a friend and spending time with them as a friend, unpaid, and then, you know, they find out that an invoice has been submitted for that time.
Yeah.
It's incredibly disappointing and hurtful.
Yeah, it is.
And confusing, you know,
It is.
because I thought you were my support worker, but then you said you wanted to hang out with me. So, you know, when you want to hang out with me, that's more of what friends do rather than work with me.
That's right.
So I think language has a lot to do with it.
True. Very true. Yeah.
But we have a long way
I'd
to
love
go.
some. Oh, sorry. I'd love some ideas, if there are any, of how to overcome this. I've just run out of ideas, I think, really.
Sorry that I arrived late, but I'm just wondering. Hi, I'm Andrea from New
Hi,
Zealand,
Andrea.
and I'm not Knight Rider. That was from a quiz game I played recently.
I like it.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't get my times right, but can you just fill me in on what you're chatting about, just the nutshell, so I can come on board? Please.
Welcome, and thank you for joining us, Angela. Sheldon's just been talking to us about how do we get rooted back to our values and purpose and realise the resources available in communities. So he shared a story with us, and are you familiar with Mural?
No, sorry, I'm not, but that's okay. Don't stop for me. You guys carry on. I'll just.
Okay, I'll put the link in the chat for you.
Thank you.
So if you'd like to have a look on there, Michaela has harvested some story gems from what Sheldon talked about.
Oh, wow. Okay, lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Then feel free. It is Angela, is it?
It's Andrea, but look,
Andrea.
I'm not
no,
bothered.
that's cool.
I get both.
That's cool. No, that's cool. I'll change it. And look, I'll and feel free to jump in on the conversation.
Thank you.
And you know, more than happy to grab notes and stuff from what you guys talk about. But answering Kate, I reckon we're starting a bit of circle support around a young man, and the first thing that we're doing is we're specifically saying, if you want to be a part of this, it's not paid. You may be a paid person in the person's life, but when you come to these circle of support meetings, you will not be paid. And I think it's really good to be straight up, you know, around and things like, you know, we're trying to create you know, community friendships that are just in the person's life because they want to be, and you know, would, you know, saying that, you know, there's a great connection there and the connection is felt, and if you're interested, then we would like to do a little bit more of that. And actually, you know, a bit of training is always good, but you don't have to be so formal. Even just a conversation of saying, this is what we're trying to do, and would you be interested in being a part of that? And then they have the opportunity to say yes or no at that time. And then they know when they come to dinner, it's not paid. You don't come when you're paid.
It had never occurred to me that they would expect payment for having a dinner.
Yeah. And maybe they never thought of being asked to dinner or being asked, you know, and they'd only played that paid role in the person's life. So they just automatically think, well, anything that I'm asked to do, I'm paid for. And they don't think outside that box either. Possibly.
And Michaela, I'd like to add in that as part of that conversation, because there were certainly times when I've supported people historically where I was getting paid and helping to bring them into community, and some of those opportunities were definitely related to my own life or things that I was interested in that allowed, I think about my friend Matt in Toronto in particular, to really help to grow his circle of people. But Kate, when we started Matt's circle, it was really clear that we wanted that people came and attended those meetings who were direct support professionals, weren't being paid. But I think you also have to frame it in the way of what we recognize is that you have something valuable to bring to the conversation that we're going to be having with, for, and about this person, and that we recognize that you're going to have some very valuable things to offer. So helping them to understand that their contribution is the reason that they're showing up too, that they're actually bringing something to the conversation. And so while you're inviting them in and you recognize that they're paid in other parts of the person's life, that this is an opportunity for them to step outside of that role, or at least think about how other people might be supported, or how they can help support others to understand who the person is that they're supporting, even if they're not being paid.
Yeah.
I think
And
also,
I think being explicit about that is the key, right? Just so that people know there is this demarcation or this boundary around it, but that the intention is not to create a boundary so much as to open up the boundaries between work and personal life for the person and for them.
Mm.
I think it also comes back to what you were saying about bastardization of those systems, because also coming from the other point of view, when you work for an organization, in most cases, there's no generosity of spirit that comes from the organization. So for example, if the support people that you'd invited around for dinner had perhaps asked their organization, what should they do about this? It's seen as a paid opportunity. So regardless of necessarily how the support workers themselves felt, it depends on how their organization feels about that sort of thing. So that's just my take. And I know it's a bit negative, Nelly, but the organizations that people work for, if they don't have a generous feeling about these things, for example, one of the people one woman had contacted me just recently, and she was saying to me that she would really like to offer people an hour of cleaning as a just an hour of cleaning. And I missed the point, and what she was offering actually was an hour of cleaning in order to gain more business from everyone. So it was sort of like an incentive thing. I thought that she was going to, some kind of, bonus for people, and how nice. But it seems to be that that's the case around the people that I have worked with, this real possessiveness of the support workers. You should go off and do things for other people unless you are paid for it. So I think that's a difficult situation. I think that's a difficult position for support workers to be in, that they need the position, they need to adhere to the organization's rules and regulations and the way they want to operate. So even feeling like they have to sneak around if they want to come and do something that's more on a personal basis, it's almost like you can't help who you fall in love with. You can't help with the people that you make friends with that are just genuine friendships, if it happens to fall into that umbrella of the people that you work for as well.
Yeah, that could very well be the case given two of the providers that we use. And their bottom line is, well, Edward's got lots of money. He's got to spend it, blah, 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 blah. And yes, I think you're right. There's a strong element of that. Yeah.
Can I just add, we have a few circles here where I'm working, and a couple of them, the families themselves decided to bring in their paid support and pay them to be there so they could be part of the planning. And it worked to some extent, but what happened was it changed the abundance of what other people wanted to offer. They sort of stepped back and let the plans happen between the paid support and the person and the family, and it became just a bigger consultation about ideas that they could do together. And it was their choice, because we do let people choose, but we encourage people not to have anyone paid in that role. And the other thing I was just thinking about, difference between friendship and enthusiasm while you are in their lives, because I think I get attached to a lot of people. So I myself, I have a 3-month informal stand down between when I've worked with a person and whether I want to offer something extra. And we've talked about a bit at work as well, about if you've worked with Sam and you'd love to do extra things with Sam, how about when you're not working with Sam, you just wait a cool down period and then you start building those little friendships that are clearly not work-based, because you're no longer working with that person. And they've been really successful. They've been like the aroha, the love is there and the connections there, and of course you've done hours with that person, so you've got to know each other's ways of working and thinking. So you can draw on that, but you know, if it's not there sort of a wee bit further down the track, then you know, it's not.
Mm,
So it's kind of one way we've got around it.
good idea.
Thoughtful.
Thanks, Andrea. Unfortunately, Sheldon's had to go. His mum was expecting him 30 minutes ago. So he's apologised for having to step out. But let's continue this conversation. Michaela, shall we do breakaway rooms, or what do you think?
Right. Juggling the mute and the stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, happy to have breakout rooms. Okay. Because it would be 2 people per breakout room, and then Meredith, you and I can join them as well.
So we're going to be putting some breakout rooms soon in a World Cafe style conversation to continue this conversation and to dig a little bit deeper into how do we get rooted back to our values and purpose and realise the resources available in our communities.
Cool.
So we'll have, about 10 minutes?
Cool.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
thanks, Mish. Welcome back.
Thank you.
How did we go?
Oh,
That's great.
yeah.
All right, so breakaway room 1, who was in that room?
I can't remember.
I can't remember. Oh,
Was that us, Shelley?
We were 2. I think we were 2, Kate.
Well, you guys can start if you like, that's okay.
Good. Yeah.
Were you
Oh,
able to do some harvesting on the mural board?
Too old to multitask.
Okay.
Basically, yes.
Would you like me to put a few dot points up there while you're talking?
Please.
Okay, great.
That would be good.
Go ahead, Kate.
What did we talk about? I guess we were just talking about how do I phrase this? I did mention that I thought, having talked with you guys, that maybe I need to do another map for Edward. Haven't done one for years, and the first one we did was amazing, was really, really good. And then I was wondering, that sparked me off on the idea of whether anything had improved for people who didn't use traditional speaking as communication. Because in the early days of person-centered planning and all the work we did, it was very difficult to have things happen for them. And people go where it's easiest. And if you've got a person who can tell you their name and what their favourite food is and their favourite likes and dislikes, it's easier to work with them. I wondered whether anything around the world had happened more for people who use a variety of communications rather than the traditional augmented one, who have a problem with language, that whole thing with, that communication is more than language. And you have to, I won't get on that soapbox. And I really enjoyed Shelley talking about the Imagine Circle blog and Plan Canada. There might be a few things there that are very exciting.
I think it's really where we can go back to roots, because so many of the rooted people are writing, are doing things, they're expressing. And so we talked about John O'Brien, just going back to reading some John O'Brien, or going hanging out with him if you get that opportunity, or just all of those pieces of it. So yeah, all the creators, the creatives.
Yeah.
It was a great conversation. Thank you.
It was great.
They are doing lots of online podcasts and things like that at the moment. So just do a bit of a Google search. I'm pretty sure John, Beth, Jack, and Linda are doing a bunch of podcasty online things.
Great, thanks, ladies. Okay, what about the other group? How did you guys go?
We did very well. Do you want to go? You go, Catherine.
I was going to say, poor Kate was stuck with 2 people who were late. So, but she kind of got us into shape quickly. And part of what we talked about was the line between like this, the urging in terms of professional boundaries combined with the fact that sometimes you do connect with the person you're working with as a friend. It's a person who would be a friend. And that I was saying, you know, where I am, services haven't done a really fantastic job of connecting people beyond the service, you know, and connecting people to other people interested in similar things that would develop natural friendships and friendships based on common interests and those kinds of things. So that's part of what we talked about, and how all 3 of us have blundered our way through that, of course, being friendly and making friends with people we've known, and dear God, look out, you know.
I think Andrea also mentioned something that was interesting and a bit thought-provoking for me, was that there's fences and boundaries put up perhaps to protect people from the risk of being exploited or being treated badly, and how that is creating a barrier. So I did make a note there of who puts up fences and boundaries, and who do they serve, because at the risk of not having a connection, how do you say it? It all comes together. You don't want to risk someone being mistreated, but what you've done then is risked not connecting. So which is the greater? Which one do you go for? And yeah, it was interesting. Yeah, keeping people safe, or does it?
Yeah, that's a great point. And sometimes that can relate to services as well. And our funding bodies, you know, in Australia, the NDIS, I find, is actually quite a huge barrier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Does anyone else want to add anything?
Yeah, I think I do, because thank you, Kate, for saying that, because it helped me get it even better, even though I was thinking about it first. I think there's got to be some way. I'm just thinking we naturally learn, and through some hard lessons sometimes, and some of us don't learn, how to work out that risk of whether somebody's going to rip us off or ask too much of us, and whether we're going to ask too much of somebody else, and we're trying to work that out. Like there's a way we learn that. So I'm just trying to think, what are the things that we learn that by, that we can naturally introduce into connecting, rather than a you know, definite, this is what you do and this is what you don't do in your role. But what does it look like? Like, do we talk about what does it look like for everybody when it's too much, or too much has been asked of you, or what is it like? We know the stories, we know our own stories and other people's stories of what it's like when we're isolated. But do we share enough story about times where the other side of things happened? I don't know, how do we learn that stuff? So how do we share that stuff so everybody can learn that stuff? Oh, good, go. Please.
With a little bit of trepidation that my comments might spin off into a whole nother hour of conversation. But I honestly believe that we need to go back to learning how to trust our own instincts and our own intuition, because we all know the people who serve us well and the people who don't, if we're connected with ourselves and we're connected with our own intuition, and we learn to follow those. But that's a whole nother conversation.
And also, that's something that people all over the place are doing all the time. We just had something, someone just posted something on our Facebook page the other day about setting boundaries. And I thought to myself, gosh, that's something that I really need to tap into. They were just statements basically of things, you know, I can't even remember them off the top of my head very well, but things like, you know, I don't have the strength to take that on at the moment, and being okay with that. And that's something that everyone can learn. It's not just a, you know, it's not just for one group of people, it's for everyone.
So true.
Yeah.
Totally.
You just remind me of Dave Weatherill, who's one of our BC elders, who says, you know, if you're thinking through something, you know, and you want to invite them, just invite them for a cup of coffee. There's no big commitment, and you never know what can grow from that. But that idea that, because oftentimes people are afraid to ask because then, or be asked even, because it's like, oh, you know, what am I signing up for? And if you said to someone, hey, we're trying to figure out, you know, Joe needs a job. Like, do you have time for a coffee? I just want to talk it through.
Yeah, it's not like it's a marriage proposal. It's just a coffee.
Exactly. It's only lunch.
Yeah, coffee and a conversation, no strings attached. I think we might be ready for checkout, Meredith.
Yeah, okay.
Great conversation, thank you.
Yeah, thanks everyone. So our checkout question for today is, what would you like to spend more time on tomorrow?
I'll pick up the piece. I'm starting to experiment with raw food desserts. So yeah, I've been playing around with I don't know, anyone in the States have heard of Gratitude Cafe? Google it. They're amazing. They got amazing cookbooks, and I've made one cake so far. I'm busting to make another one, and they're still good for you. Please go.
Sounds delicious.
I think I'll pop in. My first listening to my own intuition is nothing. I want to do less tomorrow, and I'm just kind of trying to very much listen to myself, what I have capacity for, and do as little as possible at the moment.
Can I pop in? I just want to say that Andrea's good at listening to her intuition, because I sent her the invitation to this conversation by mistake yesterday. I was sending it to someone else, and she went, I don't think this is for me. And I said, no, it's not. I was for another person. And then she's like, but I might be interested. And here she is.
Yep.
Yay.
That's true serendipity, that is.
Yeah, fantastic.
So I'll check out by saying I have a lot of writing I'd like to do, and that's what I'd like to do more of tomorrow. Thank you for today.
I guess my checkout would be, I've got to spend time in the garden, more time in the garden, as much as I can fit into my life. But I've also got two short stories to finish, so I've got to work on them as well.
I'll pick up the piece, as I have heaps of writing to do. So I've got an assignment, or 2 assignments due in. So I'm going to be writing. But then once I'm done, I'll feel fulfilled and I'll feel relaxed. So I'll be very happy. Peace back.
I'll pick up. I'd like to spend more time on me tomorrow, although I don't know if that's going to happen because I think I have a busy day. But in between, that's what I hope to do.
I'm going to be out in the garden with Kate.
Yep.
The weather's starting to turn here, and so I need to, there's some things I just want to get finished up, and some final tomatoes to pick and things like that. So get my winter patio set up.
Well, that sounds like a beautiful thing to do, particularly at this change of season, getting back into the garden. Thank you all for joining us today and for those fantastic conversations, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Sorry,
Andrea.
I'm just wondering for a second, sorry, it's a tradition of our country to finish with a blessing or a karakia. And I've just got a short one if that would be all right for you guys.
Please. Yeah,
Okay,
we'd
so
love that.
I do it in te reo and then English. So kua tipua ngā rākau, the trees have grown. Kua puawai ngā hua, the flowers have blossomed. Kua waiata te manu, the birds have sung. Kua wao, kua tau te wao, the forest has settled. Kua tau, it is settled, it is settled. Haere mai te rangimari e te atua, welcome the peace of God. So that's it.
Oh,
Thank you.
beautiful.
Kia ora.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Andrea.
Andrea. We
Thank
got one more week of this going, so if you want to join us next week, that'd be
I
great.
definitely do.
Great to meet
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Kia ora.
everyone.
See ya.
Bye,
Michaela,
everyone.